Yo, what's up? This is Q Ortiz, and welcome to Transition Talk, Mucusless Diet Healing System edition, where we're getting inside the minds and experiences of different practitioners of Professor Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System. All right, this will allow us to learn more about how living a mucus-free life, shout out to Professor Spira, or as Brother Air would say, a life towards mucuslessness, is accessible and its importance towards our future generations to come. I want to just get right to the chase. Today, we are featuring a mucusless diet healing system practitioner. Yo, Desi, what's up, man?
It's good, bro.
Just,
Yeah, man. Just over here. No, I'm at this farm. One of my friends' farms. Who they just started up like a few years ago, and I kind of watched the farm grow. So that's where I'm at now.
Nice. And then what do you have behind you? What's growing?
So over here we have some garlic.
Yeah.
Which we planted last fall. We planted like before pretty much the ground freezes.
Okay.
You plant it before the ground freezes.
Yeah.
And you mulch it really heavy. I don't know if you can see like the mulch around the garlic.
Not too much.
Nah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like so you mulch it really heavy with the hay, and it overwinters, and then it starts sprouting in the springtime, and then you harvest it in like July.
Okay.
So
does that mulch end up moving out of the way after the garlic sprouts?
No. The mulch, it helps keeps down on the weeds, and it also helps keep the garlic like warm over winter.
Okay.
And then it eventually breaks down into the soil.
Yeah.
As it kind of gets really wet and stuff, you see it's like practically soil at that point. So as it gets wetter and wetter, it starts to like decompose, and then that helps like enrich the soil over time.
Okay. Nice. How'd you get into planting?
I planted a little bit when I was younger. My dad had a garden one year when I was like between like 5 and 8 or something like that. Like maybe 5 and 10, somewhere around there. Probably around like 8 and 10 something.
Okay.
So that was a cool, like that was really the first time. Even then I wasn't even so much. Like I'm sure my dad was doing most of the work.
Yeah.
But like I at least got to see the plants from like seed to harvest. So that was like the first time gardening.
Yo, we like the connection was a little off, but we still have the audio. We continued on and just work with that audio vibe. In a world that the mucusless diet healing system is common practice. So the last thing we touched in on was you planting with your dad, then seeing the process of nature from seed to harvest, and then you were mentioning something about when you got into Dr. Sabi, but I didn't. That's where things started chopping up.
So if I could take a step back too. So
okay.
One year when I was probably like 4, my dad started a garden at the elementary school.
Okay.
Right, and that was when like my brother was in say like 5th or 6th grade. And all of the like people would tell me years later, they're like, yo, that was so cool how your dad had the garden at the school. And it was just like 1 year, but like I just noticed how much that influenced people from like just that little garden. They probably weren't even in it that often.
Yeah.
But the couple hours they were in there, it like changed their life kind of thing. Between that idea and then the idea of growing all my own food, you know, once I started eating all the fruits and the vegetables, and I was like, hey, I could grow this. And I don't have to pay for this if I grow it. And I could grow it better than if I bought it.
Uh-huh.
And you can't even buy certain varieties of certain kinds of tomatoes or apples or whatever.
Mm. What kind of varieties are you speaking about?
So with like the apples, there's all these old like I call them like heirloom apple trees,
Mm.
and they were planted like over 100 years ago, like say
Mm-hmm.
1 to 2, 300 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's just tens of thousands of trees just in like this one county,
Mm.
of these old trees that no one even really takes care of, and some of them still like produce like really really good fruit. And
Okay.
there's just for one, it's like the the fruit off the apples off these old trees is so electrical.
Mm.
It's almost like tart sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's and like you almost can't even eat that much of, like as much as you would of the store bought
Got you.
fruit.
Yeah.
And it'll pull so much mucus.
Mm.
Like when it goes through, it's just mucus coming out too. So
Interesting.
there's just
Okay.
and there's like probably about a dozen varieties of, like, when I taste all these different trees, I'm like, oh, that one reminds me of this tree. So there's like a dozen or two of these like varieties, but they're I don't know what varieties they are, and you don't really see them in the stores. Like it's just very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Each of them. Some of them are like they ripen really soon in the year, and they're like not as juicy, or some of them are very juicy, some of them are not as juicy. Yeah, it's just all these different kinds of varieties.
Okay. What can that lead to if you were to eat too much of those tart apples? Like how, because it's like people could hear, oh, what? Like apples remove mucus, and then try to go overboard on eating a bunch of apples. Like how, yeah, like what would you
Yeah.
say in that kind of situation?
So that's almost, I think that the store-bought food really lends itself to overeating,
Mm.
whereas with the natural food is very stronger a lot of times. So
Okay.
like the feeling would kind of be like eating too many lemons, where you just feel just a little agitated, like
Mm.
kind of in the just on the palate, or just like
Mm. Mm-hmm.
can just feel like you dug a little too deep when you overdo it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with some of the apples or the grapes, I know this also too. The grapes are like right off of a vine.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like Concord grapes.
Mm.
You know how Concord grapes are like sour like that?
I haven't had many Concord just from where I'm at
Right.
to have that full. Yeah, I see people on that East Coast talking about Concord grapes, where
Mm.
I used to live out there where I'm from, New York. And when I lived out there, I wasn't on that nature vibe so much. I appreciated fruits and vegetables, but it was in a different way. It was sort of more superficial in the sense of, okay, I'm eating them and I'm doing it. I'm working on it. I did get deeper into it over time, like choosing to grab apples and move into that direction, cut up bell peppers and grill it here and like that. But yeah, I didn't get into that fresh off the vine grapes and lemon trees and any of that until I was out here in California, and I'm missing those Concord grapes. Yeah, it sounds like I'm missing out.
Right. So if anyone ever had a Concord grape versus the store-bought grape,
Yeah,
like that is the exact difference of the store-bought apples versus like the apples off the tree.
got you. Okay.
There's like that same like electrical kind of like tanginess.
Mm, okay. So when we're like speaking about electric, I know you're coming from a background of practicing some of Dr. Sebi's methodology where he speaks about electric alkaline foods. How do you tie in that electric nature with the foods and how do you tie that in?
Originally, like Sabi was my dad is vegetarian, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I was raised for the first 4 years like without eating like animal flesh,
Mm.
but I was still eating some dairy and eggs, like a lot of eggs and a lot of
Mm.
grains and like soy products.
Yeah.
So my parents split up when I was like 5.
Okay.
So for half the week when I would go to my dad's house, we'd be eating vegetarian dishes.
Okay.
So when I was 17, I seen this video by Dr. Sabi, and he was saying how eating blood and starch, meaning animal products, is blood, what he considered blood, and then starch is your mucus-forming vegetables.
Uh-huh.
He put like that idea forth and how all these diseases and things could be healed. And there's this side of people going from very poor health to kind of healing to be like so-called regular health,
Uh-huh.
right? But then there was also the idea of people being in like somewhat of regular health, like having what Ehret would call like latent disease,
Mm.
where they're like relatively healthy, but the idea of even bringing your health up like to a way higher level.
Okay. Where do
So
you say that's shown? The
um
idea of bringing your health to a
so,
higher level?
in Ehret's work, but more so like I was saying in Dr. Sabi's work,
Mm.
he always speaks on a returning to a more like ancient lifestyle,
Okay.
that we've strayed from our natural lifestyle, and that's why we've suffered these afflictions, and that the more we go back closer to our nature, like our natural way of living, the more that certain things will be seen that we might see as like superhuman, so to say, or just like pushing the boundaries of human capability,
Yeah.
could be very like usual in certain like societies.
Coming from Dr. Sabi's work, there must have been something that you saw in the mucusless diet healing system that allowed you to see there was more to what you were practicing. What made you shift over, and how do you incorporate what you've learned from Dr. Sabi's work into the mucusless diet healing system by Professor Arnold Ehret?
Word. So my first introduction to the diet was Brother Air giving his speech after his like 8.5 month fast.
Yeah.
And at the time, you know, Sabi spoke about he did his long fast, and how that
Oh,
is, yeah.
Sabi did fast also?
Sabi did. So when he was around like 30 years old, he said he was like 290 pounds or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He said he wore glasses, he was diabetic, and he was impotent, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said for like 3 years or something like that. He goes to this Mexican like herbalist, shaman, and the shaman tells him you need to do a 90-day fast on
Uh-huh.
these herbal teas.
Yeah, yeah.
And he says 90 days. He says I'll die, and the guy says you're gonna die if you keep living the way you're living.
Mm.
So he did 90 days on he said the guy gave him 3 big bags of tea. And
Mm.
he said this is for this one bag's for the first month, second bag second month, third bag third month.
Okay.
And he said that just as he went on the fast, 17 days in, he could see again, and he came back to life pretty much, and he had
Yeah.
lost like 100 pounds or whatever by the end.
Mm.
So Sabi spoke about fasting being integral. And then so Brother Air was also coming from that perspective. But what really drew me in with Brother Air is because at the time too, I was also looking into the breatharian kind of methodologies and
Okay.
ideology.
Yeah.
And Brother Air was coming from a different angle, saying he's doing all these things these so-called breatharians are doing.
Mm.
None of these breatharians are really going 10 years without food. Like all of them will always, like even admittedly will be like, well, I did 2 years and then I went back and ate some stuff and then now I'm back on the breatharian thing, but Brother Air put it in perspective where he's not just so much looking for that title. He's not so wrapped up in that title. And the mucusless diet isn't so wrapped up in these titles.
Okay.
So that was what that was what really made me recognize that there's something with the mucusless diet as far as the transition system goes that I didn't see elsewhere.
Okay. And I have a question. Let's see. What about breatharianism, for people who don't know what that is? It's like, what about breatharianism? Like, how do you interpret it? And what about it were you attracted to even lead you into fasting and seeing Brother Aaron and seeing how notable that was?
Right. No, it's a really good question, because I think for a lot of people, food is such an enjoyable part of life that it makes no sense why you would want to like deny yourself.
What? Like, yeah, I could hear everyone now. Yeah, it's like hashtag foodie. All the
Right. Exactly. I think more recently I've really internalized and like been able to verbalize like what the feeling is. But like when I was a child, I just remember like wanting to play. Like to get me to sit down to eat.
Yeah.
If I wasn't hungry or whatever, it was like play being more important than food.
Okay. Yeah.
So like once you can realize that there's like so many things in life that bring that same joy kind of things that we could associate with food, you learn that that food doesn't need to be just that I guess that's part of the like the positive side you can see of the breatharian
yeah
ideology, because there's also the more like negative sides that I could see.
Okay, what would that be?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a bit like a superiority complex.
For not needing food.
Yeah, like I'm the evolved human on the planet. So like there's that part. There's also the part where people already have certain negative associations with food. And instead of addressing them, they just want to totally ignore them and just be like, let's just stop eating. Don't need for food. And so like Brother Air says, like when you make something so beautiful into something so ugly, like how people can take something like veganism, like not eating animals, and then just go mixing in all these crazy foods and turn this beautiful idea into something that's causing just as much harm.
Yeah. So did you have, speaking of veganism, did you have a transitionary period where you got into veganism specifically, like the ideals?
No, because Sabi was like I said, my father was vegetarian. So when I first heard Sabi saying don't eat animals, it wasn't so much of a foreign idea. And I knew so many vegetable dishes that I could like eat, and instead of eating animals, like I could be like, if eating animals is causing this much harm, I can stop right now.
Yeah.
And still be satisfied with vegetable meals. Right. So Sabi, because I was coming from a not eating animals from a health perspective. The vegan, like ethical perspective of hurting the animals or saving the planet, I had heard that all my life from my father. So that was never enough to get me to stop completely. So after I heard of Dr. Sabi and I kept looking at vegan and raw veganism and this and that, I was still, for whatever reason, like the vegan label, I was always hesitant to accept. Like I would always say like vegan for lack of a better word. People say, you vegan? I say, well, I don't eat animals. I say, well, I eat fruits and vegetables, like, you know?
Yeah.
So I would always the vegan, because I noticed early on, like I didn't want to be associated with a lot of the vegan camps. It wasn't necessarily the same thing that I was doing. They were doing. Yeah.
What would you say the differences were between those other camps, what they were doing in the veganism camps and what you were doing as a practitioner of Dr. Sebi's work and the Mucusless Diet Healing System as well?
Word. So like, because I grew up eating kind of the veggie burgers like that my dad would have and whatever.
Okay.
I stopped eating animals. I said, I'm not eating those veggie burgers either. I'm not eating any fake animal stuff. No fake cheeses. No, like almond milk. That's the one thing I did. I have had almond milk throughout my whole transition. Like I'll go maybe like a year or two at the most where I haven't had it.
Yeah.
And then I'll go time where I'm more using it. But like,
how would you use the almond milk?
At first, I would mix it into smoothies.
Oh, I see.
And then also a time early on, I was actually drinking straight almond milk, which was kind of weird because like I never even drank regular milk like that. Right, but there's a moment, I was just like, for whatever, I'd be like, oh, let me have something to drink. I'd say like, oh, let me drink some almond milk.
Yeah.
And there was this time early on, like I was drinking the almond milk, and I was just hearing about the mucusless diet, and then I heard Professor Spira say, oh, that almond milk, that's problematic. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't get too far into that. you know, he's put the word of caution out there. And it was like around the time I was like having like at night, maybe I have my salad or like my fruits in the day, salad at night, and then like I might have a glass of almond milk like after, like a late night, something like that. That's how I would have it.
Yeah.
And I remember I had this like I got so congested, I was just like probably just coughing up, sneezing up, like all this mucus. I just was like, I don't know where this is coming from. Like I knew it was part of the cleansing. Yeah. Even at that time. But then when Professor Spira was like, yeah, that almond milk, that's it just immediately I was like, oh, that's where that's coming from. Like that's what I'm sneezing up right now.
Yeah.
So I pulled back off of it, but I still do use it occasionally.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll have it, like I was saying, sometimes like granola, even though I have it very like rarely, but that has been one like transition item that I'll go to after I feel like years growing up eating cereal. Yeah. Like cereal, milk, that granola with the almond milk, it's kind of like almost brings me back, you know, every so often. That's like a real treat. Yeah.
Where that's like daily and even nightly for people to eat cereal with the milk and other more tainted cereals, where I noticed in the Mucusless Diet Healing System, when Professor Arnold Ehret does bring up cereals, he's speaking of it where you're toasting it, like removing the gluey properties of the. Well, actually, let me just bring up cereals.
On that note too.
On point. Yeah, what's up?
Were you the one talking about millet? You were saying like you didn't really like millet as much as some of the other grains. Was that you or someone else in the Mucusless diet calls?
I don't know if I brought it up. And just raw cereal should be roasted first whenever desired. and will be found to work as a good intestinal broom, although they contain stimulants. That's straight from the mucus healing
Right.
recipes in the Mucusless Diet Healing System by Professor Arnold Ehret, annotated, revised, and edited by Professor Spira. And I might not have mentioned that, but that is my reality. Where millet, I'm not really attracted too much to that. But if it came down to it, as far as grains, I think more like a quinoa or a wild rice.
Right.
I'm like more into that type of grain.
Right. So yeah, the reason like I like the granola, and I feel
Uh-huh.
like it's somewhat along the system of the Ehret system is the mucusless diet system is because the, you're toasting the oats into granola.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right. Instead of like oatmeal, like you're kind of just having some soppy oats.
Yeah, you're soaking up with the oatmeal, you're soaking up all the water, and then it's just clogging up the intestines. Yeah, and then the intestines they're absorbing that water more. So then it's just, yeah, soppy oats. It was getting a little choppy where you were speaking about using the almond milk and noticing after hearing Professor Spira give some sort of warning about, yo, like I would be careful about the almond milk. You already noticing mucus congestion coming up in your body, and then you saw it and was like, oh, that, like, you had the question like, where's this coming from? And then finding out, or just like concluding, yo, it's this almond milk that I've been having as like a nightly kind of snack, nightly comfort, nourishment kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like automatic. I was like, oh, that's that.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew it. Yeah, yeah.
I think it was like that with cheese for me, because I would add cheese in the, like bean and cheese burritos out here are really popular. So when I came out here, I hadn't had different like Mexican food, so to speak, like quote unquote Mexican food, where when I was in New York, I saw more Taco Bell. Like that was my introduction to like burritos and that kind of thing. So yeah, when I got out here, that was just like bean and cheese burritos constantly. But I'll notice whenever I had the cheese, my nose would just block up and my breath was shallow. So yeah, that for me, I just cut that out and then notice the difference immediately. Just eating the beans without the cheese, noticing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then further seeing the congestion that the beans was causing. So it's just like seeing how much seeing how much of the foods that are so common in civilization, it's like just Western civilization and just all our civilization foods, seeing how they're still obstructing, like how much each food
Wow.
is obstructing.
Like when you eat them all together and you almost don't even have a problem. Like you just go about life.
Uh-huh.
But then you start removing, like you take the cheese away, and then you're feeling good. But then like when like you're just working with one say like mucus former, and
Uh-huh.
you notice you can really dial in on like, wow, like that's what the beans do as they ferment. They smell like this. They bubble up like that, or
Yeah.
that's how the grains do. But when
Uh-huh.
you're mixing them all together, you just don't even, if you, maybe some people don't feel good after they eat the food, but they can't even identify like what's really causing what. They're just
Uh-huh.
like,
Yo, that's an excellent point. Just the nature of dissecting the different foods that we're eating in order to see their effects on our body. What
right,
is rice doing to it? What are beans doing to a clean body? right? Like how do we clean up our bodies to a point where we can identify how these foods are reacting with us? How are those tart apples that you mentioned earlier, like how is that reacting to my body in combination with the rice and beans that I had earlier? Like if I ate this apple after I ate that, how does that react, and vice versa? So yeah, that was a very important, I think that in a sense is the transition, like that. And that's the spirit of Professor Arnold Ehret, where he's getting into dissecting each food and looking at ways to increase their efficiency in how we're processing so we have vitality.
Right.
Word up.